Mercedes-AMG Interview Lounge.
If you've never watched Brené Brown on Netflix or her TED Talks, or if you've never experienced her podcast, which we're now getting into, it's something I suggest you give it a try. And plus, she's a Texas girl, and I'm a Texas girl, so we have that in common. So she's speaking my language. So good morning, Brené. Welcome to our show. Thank you for being with us today.
Good morning from Houston. How are you?
Oh, I can hear it in your voice. I want to go home. I want to go. I wish I was there right now. We're doing very well.
It. It's like there's like 90% humidity. You just walk outside, your glasses fog up, sweat rolls down the back of your neck. It's H-Town, baby.
Oh, God. Living in the swamp. Well, look, I know you're very busy. Thank you for your time. We were listening to, I was listening to some podcast material last week, and I know you just put out a podcast with Alicia Keys that our Danielle just heard. Are you enjoying this podcast life? Are you loving it?
Oh, my God, I'm loving it. I am loving it. I just haven't done anything that I loved like this in a while, that I'm such a curious person that, you know, and I've probably conducted, I don't know, like 10,000 interviews, because that's what I do for a living as a researcher. But I just love listening and asking questions and prodding and pushing a little bit. It's just, yeah, it's my thing completely. I had no idea.
Do you have a favorite thing that you like to research?
Do I have a favorite thing I like to research? Yeah, I really, vulnerability is my thing, but I really love digging into, we all think vulnerability is weakness, because that's definitely how I was raised, but how most of us were raised. I love digging into the fact that vulnerability is the birthplace of courage, and that whether I'm talking to special forces or I'm talking to CEO or talking to healthcare workers, this idea that there is no courage without vulnerability, and that all of us are so afraid to let ourselves be seen. I mean, that's probably my favorite research.
And I love it. Wow. It's a great message too. It's so simple and pure. Showing vulnerability is the opposite of showing weakness. It's actually showing me courage. And we encourage everyone to open up, to let everyone know how you're feeling. And it's really funny, if you're talking to someone about how you feel, you somehow hear your words come out of your mouth, and it helps you understand yourself better as well. Hey, anxiety, mental health anxiety. There are many shades of anxiety on the spectrum. There's everything from the anxiety that needs to be treated. There's also day-to-day anxiety, which you've talked about in your podcast. And that's something that the majority of us are experiencing every day. Is there any quick spin or any quick thought you have on that that's sort of like a Brené Brown 101 thought on anxiety at the house?
Definitely. I mean, I think we're all in it. I mean, if you're not feeling a little anxious right now, I'm not sure you're paying attention. So I think we're all in some anxiety. What's helpful for me to understand about anxiety is that it is the most contagious emotion or affect that we experience. So when one person brings anxiety into a situation, it usually just catches fire. So one of the ways that we talk about it is that anxiety is never a function of just a single individual. It's always a function of groups, of teams, of families. So the hard news is that your anxiety or our anxiety is contagious. The great news is that calm is also contagious. And two things I would say about anxiety that I think are helpful. One is most of us have very patterned ways of expressing anxiety that we learned in our first families. Some of us overfunction, where we become kind of controlling, micromanaging, bossing everybody, telling everybody what to feel and what to do. And some people start underfunctioning in anxiety. They don't show up. They are less capable. They are not dependable. And so it's really helpful to understand that when we go into anxiety, like in my house, we name it. We say, look, I think everyone's in some anxiety. I'm an overfunctioner because I'm the oldest of four, codenamed Sister Superior growing up.
Right.
It's really helpful just to name, hey, we're in it, and we need to start practicing calm, which means slowing down the way we talk, taking some breaths, reality checking whether anxiety is really helpful in that moment. So I think the hardest thing about anxiety is a lot of the times the way we show up for us is shaming. Like, I don't want to be a controlling, kind of person, but it's not always who I am, but it's the way I was raised to deal with anxiety. So understanding that there's different ways we show up and understanding that calm is contagious, I think are both helpful.
I love that. Here on our family, we have a family of 15 people working on the show, and we're all in our heads right now, like labeling each other. Okay, he's an overfunctioner. She's an underfunctioner. It's okay. It's all right. It's okay.
It's helpful to talk about. I mean, it's helpful to talk about, and I mean, it's probably better for people to own their own thing. But the minute I read this, I read it from Harriet Lerner's book, The Answer Connection. I was like, oh my God! I just started labeling everybody, which was not the intention, but it's helpful.
It is. It's good to put people give them like hi, my name is overfunctioning. A little label on your lapel. By the way, if you're just turning us on, Brené Brown is here, and I want you to check out her podcast. I'm going to get more into that in just a moment. Gandhi, you have a question for Brené?
Yes. So we talk about this all the time. It is very important to be calm, especially if you're feeling a lot of anxiety right now. But what is the best way to tell someone to calm down without saying calm down? Because that's a trigger. Right. That never works.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's like a punch you in the face response.
Yes.
But that's what you're thinking. So I think what's weird? Here's what the data show. Reflect back what you want to see in them. So if I call you and I'm like, Gandhi, you're not going to believe what happened. I heard this was happening, and I heard there may be layoffs, and I heard if you come back and you're like, hey, come down, blah, 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 it just gets ratcheted up. So use the voice, the breath, the reflection that you want back. So if you come at me with that, I go back and say, I haven't heard about that. Can you say more? Like reflect back the cadence and the level. And the thing I always ask myself, 2 questions. 1, do I have enough data to freak out? Number 2, if I have enough information to freak out, is it going to be helpful? So a lot of times, because we have these things called mirror neurons that people try to match when we're in conversation with them, if you return anxiety with anxiety, it ramps up. If you can stay calm, it's much better than telling someone to stay calm.
You know what I find so interesting? You're talking about, and I love that, by the way, if you want people to calm down, then just give them what you want from them, like I'm doing right now. Now, I've been living out on my farm, Brené, by myself with my schnauzer for 2 weeks, and I've found that my anxiety level is nowhere. I don't really have any anxiety at all, except, on the show when things go wrong, whatever. And I'm finding that it is contagious. There's no one here to give me anxiety except for my dog. And he's, all he does is craps on the, in the yard, and I pick it up. It's like, that's it. It's all it is. So it's so important to approach any relationship we have with our family or anyone we're quarantined with or anyone at work, give them what you want back. And I think that's just so simple. It's just great advice. By the way, the ongoing crisis we're dealing with, and I'm sure you're already thinking ahead during this time, Brené, for your next podcast, like what's your new headline and how we're dealing with what's going on with coronavirus and our relationships with each other? What is your new thought that you're really starting to take form with?
We can't give up on people because we're all we have, no matter how frustrated we are or challenged. And I think the 2 things that I'm thinking right now really a lot and focusing the podcast on is we can't give up on each other. We're really all we have. And we are inextricably connected to each other. This idea that we can take care of just ourselves, like we either get well together or we stay sick together. And so we're not great. We're really good at individualist thinking, I think, in this country. Again, 5th generation Texan, like that's definitely the way I was raised. But we're either going to get well together or we're going to stay sick together. And we've got to turn the I to we and the them to us. That's a really big thing right now that all of us, that's a new muscle for us to work on because most of us don't have it.
And how do you feel life is going to be like after the pandemic? I know it's hard to look into a crystal ball, but we can already see patterns forming. Like, will we be shaking hands ever again? No one's going to be playing beer pong. I mean, that's a thing of the past. I mean, but other than that, how about our connections with each other and ourselves? How do you think this could be reshaping us?
I don't know. I have no idea. My husband's a pediatrician and we talk about it all the time. And he's like, I have no idea it'll reshape the medical community for sure. Hopefully it'll reshape some of our leadership around pandemic readiness, but I don't know how it's going to change us. But what I do know is one of the things that's very hard right now for us is that we are both trying to find a new normal right now and grieving the loss of normal right now. And that's a big ask to do both those things at the same time, which is why I think we need to be, kind and gentle with ourselves and with other people. I was going to cuss, but I'm not going to because I'm on the radio. It's a shoot show. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Okay. We get it. I love talking to a Texan. You know what's great about Texans, and Brené is a master at this, is storytelling. My dad, God rest his soul, he would just love to stand and hold court and tell stories, and no one told stories like my dad. And I found that you and my father have those storytelling abilities in common. What, in your opinion, kind of off topic a little bit, what is your advice on how to tell a story? Can you do that, or is this something that you were born with and you can't explain it?
Well, there's probably a BS gene that we get in Texas, but I think the best storytellers, the best stories have specificity. It's like I was thinking about my big love, John Prine, who died yesterday, and songwriter extraordinaire, storyteller. We think that the stories that will resonate are the ones that are not very specific, so they reach more people. But if we want other people to see their lives reflected in our stories, you got to get specific. A story about how the screen porch sounds when it closes, the story about the smell of my grandmother's beer bread, the story of fighting over the mess my husband leaves at his sink that I have to share. Like, the more specificity in a story, the more our lives feel connected to it. So I think specificity, and don't rush it. Small moments are great stories.
I love that. I love how being specific is also basically another way of saying painting pictures with your words. And I think that's such a talent.
Yeah.
And look, Brené Brown, if you're loving what you're hearing, and I know you are, I would check her out right now. The TED Talk on vulnerability is my favorite, or also anything on Netflix you can catch. And this podcast, Unlocking Us, where you just hung out with our friend Alicia Keys. And it's great. Brené, having you on here has calmed me down. I'm ready to conquer the world. And we thank you so much for your time.
Go do it. Thank y'all for having me on. It was fun.
Are you a gig 'em or a hook 'em horns?
What? Hook 'em horns.
Oh, I'm sorry. I got to gig 'em.
Wow.
I got to gig 'em. Unlocking Us is the podcast. Make sure you give it a listen right now, wherever podcasts are found. Brené Brown, have a beautiful day. Thanks for your time today.
Y'all too.